excited to be with you today talking about unconscious bias. Want to make sure that we're really paying attention to this topic as it does play into workplace decisions. Just one quick fun fact. Less than 14% of American men are over 6 feet tall, yet more than 60% of corporate CEOs are over 6 feet tall. Less than 4% of American men are over 6 feet 2 inches tall, yet more than 36% of corporate CEOs are this height. Why is this? There seems to be an association of power and height, and that's playing out in the workplace, and it's very subtle. The reason for that is because back when we were in the Sahara, we would look to the person who was the tallest to make sure that we could go find food. And so we're starting to see things that really were processed as a part of our brain and our thinking or our thinking from millions of years ago show up in business decisions today. So if we explore this same concept as it relates to generations, millennials, we took a couple of statistics from some Pew research and found, really want to understand, what do we think is valid as it relates to cross-generational communication. So if we look at how millennials and Gen X connects with their friends versus how they connect with their leaders in meetings or connect across performance evaluations. What do we think here? Just take a moment to think about this. So if you assume that millennials wanted to connect with their friends and do things in business or work online, and that Generation X was very much different from millennials as it relates to work, you would have been wrong. So if we take a look at these statistics, while yes, millennials like to use technology to connect with friends and to text to connect with friends and leverage social networks, when they're at the workplace, they do prefer face-to-face meetings to meet with supervisors, to discuss their progress and career, and to talk about compensation, the same as any other generation. This brings us to the concept of unconscious bias and stereotypes. Bias are basically just filters that we leverage to make decisions. And if we think about it, we actually are taking in 11 million pieces of information at any one time. This plays into our perceptions and our interpretations. And we can really only process 40 to 50 pieces of information at any one time. What does that really mean? It means that we have to categorize. So NYU actually did a study. We make 11 different decisions within 7 seconds of meeting someone. Many of these decisions are related to likability, race, sexual orientation, age, a number of different things. They're here actually. So within 7 seconds of meeting someone, before they ever say a word, we've summed up their appearance, their gender, we've made decisions about their knowledge and their skills, and this definitely impacts people in the workplace. So how do these show up in everyday working? How does bias show up in our everyday working? The bias of familiarity is one of the first. It's when we basically show partiality to someone who is like us because they graduated from the same university, or they have a similar degree, or there's just something about this person that reminds you of yourself. We see this in interviews all the time where we may subtly ask a question, but because one person went to the same university as we did, if they seem nervous in an interview, we may say, take a deep breath, it's fine, give them a little bit of encouragement, or maybe without even speaking, shift our body language to be more open, where we may not do that same thing for someone else, and it's a subtle signal that they have that really impacts how well they may do in an interview. Confirmation bias, when we look to confirm information that we already have. So we see this in presentations or when we're reviewing data to prove or disprove a particular decision that we would like to make. We've seen people pull together, maybe they do some research and they have 10 different points that they would like to make, and they keep the 8 that support the decision that they want and leave out the 2 pieces that do not support that. The primacy and recency effect. When we're judging the interactions of an individual through the initial engagement with them or the most recent engagement. We see this all the time in performance evaluations. So John did a really great job the last 3 weeks. He deserves a raise, while Sally has really been mucking it up for the last 2 days, and we have some concerns about her performance even if she was great all year. The halo effect is when we isolate one characteristic and we emphasize it to such an extent that everything they do sort of falls into that characteristic. So someone may be a really great tester. So now we've assumed that they can lead a project as a project manager or be a really good business analyst, and it's all really based on one particular characteristic. This can be negative as well. If someone has struggled in a particular role, we've now colored everything that they'll do from that point based on them not being able to succeed in one specific role or on one specific project. So we must be careful of the halo effect. Reactive devaluation. So probably 80% of the time, I'd say, when we invite some folks to attend a workshop on diversity and inclusion, their first reaction is probably reactive devaluation. Why are you inviting me to this training on diversity and inclusion? Have I done something wrong? Is there a compliance issue? Because they react and devalue potentially what they are about to encounter. Another great business example would be a change request. So if a client is coming to a meeting and Capgemini is on the other side of the table and we must now negotiate a change request, we're both devaluing and reacting to that process, where the client may think we're just trying to get more money, and the consulting party knows that the client wants to sort of extend the scope without paying more. This is a challenge that we see in the professional services industry. The just world hypothesis is the refusal to accept a scenario based on your perception of fairness. The best example that I have is if you had, again, using a professional services example, 10 women on the same project. 5 of the women feel like it's a great place for women to work, it's a great project. 5 of the women feel like it's the worst project they've ever been on, and that they're faced with gender bias every day, just based on completely different perceptions of what's fair. The interesting piece about unconscious bias is that a lot of where it shows up in the workplace is very subtle. We refer to this as micro behaviors. So we can have micro-inequities, which mean there's subtle things that happen that may negatively impact individuals in the workplace. Also, micro-advantages are those subtle advantages that someone may have. If we go back to the height example, someone who is tall and enters a room based on the way that our brain associates height with power would have an advantage presenting or sharing an idea over someone who's short. We also see this in meetings when we have folks engage that are representative of diversity, where a woman, a minority, a younger person may state an idea, someone in a position of power, a man, a non-minority may say exactly the same idea, and now everybody loves the idea, while when the other person said it, nobody even heard the idea. So we see that show up in business, and now I'd like to share a video with you on micro behaviors.
Hey ladies, are you off to the mall to do some shopping during lunch?
No, we're just gonna go get a bite to eat.
Unconscious bias isn't always obvious. One of the more subtle signs are short, seemingly innocent statements that can either denigrate or demean the recipient of the statement. These are called microaggressions or micro-inequities.
So the video just reinforces the concept of micro behaviors, and I'm sure you can think of examples where either you've experienced this or been a part of conversations, meetings where you've witnessed others experience this. Why does this happen? Because we feel much faster than we think. We think in milliseconds, and We categorize and stereotype and interact with people all the time, much faster than we give ourselves time to process and think about exactly what it is we want to say, or we react before we've actually thought about the fact that we're reacting or what we're reacting to. The best book on this is Thinking Fast and Slow, where it really digs into the fact that very, very quickly we'll have an emotional reaction to someone's appearance, to their ethnicity, to their race, a number of different characteristics. And it's really important for us to make sure that we pause and really consider what are the things that are driving me to a particular decision as it relates to any people decisions in our workforce, in our partnerships, in our communities. There are a couple of studies that provide statistics and research to support this. There was a study from the Chicago School of Business that basically showed that there was discrimination or people didn't get callbacks for their resumes based on just their ethnic sounding last name. So many organizations have now removed names from the resume process to remove that particular bias. Rutgers University also found that there was really almost a double-edged sword for women, where if people had bias that a particular role should be for a woman, they were more likely to want to put a woman in that role. And if they found that a particular role seemed to have characteristics that were more masculine in nature, they would not want women or not think women were capable of fulfilling those roles. While if a role seemed more feminine, men could still apply and gain that role as well as women. But it was just a bit of a double-edged sword in terms of, women weren't looked at for roles that were seemed masculine in nature, but men could apply for roles that seemed feminine in nature in terms of the qualities that they were exhibiting. So really, really interesting. I think we've seen some similar cases and studies from Sheryl Sandberg and Lean In terms of even the recent McKinsey report on the fact that women working for women managers and how they're rated in performance evaluation in comparison to women working for male managers, and how they're both similarly rated, where regardless of whether the person that you're working for is a man or a woman, we see things like leadership in women being described as aggressive, or a number of stereotypes around the same capabilities in men. So we just want to be careful about the bias as it relates to gender and leadership in performance evaluations. If you're curious to really try to settle whether you have unconscious bias, I can square that up for you now. You do. We all have unconscious bias. As long as we're breathing, we have it and we exhibit it. But you can take the implicit association test from Harvard University. The University of Virginia and the University of Washington got together and formed Project Implicit. They have a number of tests that were created many years ago, more than 10 years ago now. Millions of people across 20 different countries have completed them, and they will help you identify where you have bias. Because you have it, you just want to understand and uncover where you have it. Once you've taken that step, we like to share that, it's not over. It doesn't mean you're a bad person. It doesn't identify you as racist or sexist or homophobic. But there are things that you can do, strategies to mitigate your bias. You never erase bias because we all have it, but there are steps that you can take to mitigate it in the workplace. The first one is really to tell the truth to yourself. Understand where your bias is or lies, and those implicit association tests are one way to do that. Some questions that you may think through or talk through as you explore really grasping and understanding where your bias is what groups make you the most uncomfortable as it relates to appearance, race, or religion. Politics is also another great example right now. Business situations that you feel most uncomfortable. What kinds of people make you nervous? What are the traits that they're exhibiting that make you nervous? And then what are characteristics of the people that you're trying to please? The second strategy, noticing what influences your decision making. So asking yourself, how might your perception of someone or the situation be influencing your decision making? Consider your last major decisions and how they were influenced by your feelings about others. Taking extra time during stress to make fair decisions. The third strategy, stretching your comfort zone. So really making sure that you're interacting with people across multiple diversity groups and engaging with people and not assuming that, one person can be the spokesperson for any aspect or element of diversity. So we have multiple employee resource groups in North America. I recognize that is a North America concept to have so many networks engaged on different employee engagement opportunities, but you can also find other avenues and channels to reach out with different diversity dimensions. Number 4, really making sure that you seek input and feedback from others to understand where your bias lies and how you're showing up when you engage with other people. The meeting example I gave earlier, some people don't even recognize when they've overspoken or talked over someone in a meeting or really exhibited a micro-inequity and made someone feel like their input was not valuable in a meeting. So you really need feedback to explore that in the best way. And some questions you might talk through are, do you only respond or accept feedback from particular individuals? If the person who reports to you is giving you feedback, do you hear that differently than you hear feedback from your boss or your peers? So some things to consider, and that could be based on age, ethnicity, country of origin. Multiple factors could be playing into how you receive feedback from others. Finally, we love our metrics at Capgemini because results count. So really measuring how you are doing in this space and understanding your own patterns by tracking the decisions that you make. Were your 5 last hires all women or all men or all millennials? Who do you coach? Do you coach people who are just like you? When you're thinking about this, just recognizing your patterns can help you make a big difference in how you're showing up and where your bias is in the workplace. Thank you for your time on this today. I hope you've learned something in our conversation on unconscious bias.
People matter, results count.